Talk to a candidate for Metro Council District 1. Eric B. Lewis is in with us. Eric, welcome back to Talk 1073, man. How are you?
Good, Brian. Thank you for having me, man. Appreciate it.
Glad to have you on. Metro Council District 1. Hey, let's back up here. You and I have talked a number of times, and we've known each other since you were advocating for more school choice, more
Yes,
vouchers
sir.
along the way. Looking at running for Metro Council, what's got you up, out, and in the race?
So the biggest two main things. One, growing up in Baton Rouge and having the opportunity to move away to Dallas and live in other places and travel other places. I think that there's a lot of potential in Baton Rouge that we have not realized. Again, based on things I've seen in other places. But two, related to that, after I graduated from Southern University with a degree in electrical engineering, I was recruited away from Baton Rouge to go work for Texas Instruments. It had offers from other places around the country as well, but had no offers whatsoever here in our own community. And so, like many of my peers, again, left the city for better opportunities. And so, unfortunately, I'm very proud of her, but my oldest daughter, basically did the same thing a couple of weeks ago. We moved her up to Ohio again. And so I really want to, which has always been a push of mine, is create opportunities for young people and for families to be successful here in Baton Rouge.
I like where we're already starting because it leads me right into my next question. And I'm asking this of every candidate who sits down, what are the three biggest problems facing Baton Rouge?
So what's interesting is the things that I've learned from the folks in my community and Council District 1 are also issues that folks throughout the parish are concerned about. And so one being public safety, infrastructure and drainage, and then educational attainment.
Interesting, because what you led with right there wasn't listed as one of the three, and that would be the economic opportunities. Do you find that those three that you just talked about play into it on a bigger role?
I do, and that's one of my. So we actually have 5 pillars from within our campaign. So economic development and youth development are the other 2.
Okay.
But I think those 3 that I mentioned impact economic development, obviously. And so when I talk about educational attainment, one of the interesting things is a lot of times people say that the city has nothing to do with education. And I actually honestly disagree with that. And so within our campaign, we actually have all 4 of the public school districts in Metro Council District 1, or a portion of each of the 4 school districts in Metro Council District 1. And so it's important for me that as a council member that we collaborate and we work very closely with our school district, both on education and the youth development piece to create opportunities for our young people to be exposed to.
It's important to do it, but how, from a council standpoint, would you go about it?
So I think the one example that I've shared with folks, a few years ago, the Summer Youth Employment Program was reinstated when Mayor Haldaine was in office. And so I think that's one example where the school districts and the city can collaborate to ensure that we create a pipeline for kids that may not have access or know about programs like this that the city is offering, and kind of funnel that through the school systems themselves. So it was interesting when that was reinstated, several years ago, again, when Mayor Haldaine was in office. A friend of mine and I, we sat and we talked to a school board member from EBR, and they honestly didn't even know the program was rolling back out. And so a couple weeks later, you see kids lined up around the River Center, trying to get into the program. And so those are just examples. I think another example is with the community service centers that are located in many of our inner city districts. And there's a community center in Cheneyville in District 1, utilizing those. Again, that's a city resource that our students can access. I know in District 7, because I actually worked it, there's after-school tutoring that takes place. And so that's another example of city resources that can be utilized to benefit our students.
See, this is why we have the conversation. You say education, and I instantly think inside the classroom.
Yeah.
I asked you for examples, and you just rattled off 6 that are all outside the classroom. Yeah. And it's a way to take one thing that looks like it's not attainable and you rework it until it is attainable. Love it. All right, so that's educational attainment. Public safety was on your list as well.
Yes, sir. And so for me, I think there's 2 aspects to it. I mean, obviously there's a lot of angst that's going on nationally and here recently even within our own state with the the killing of the young man in Lafayette by the police, and then there's 2 state police investigations that have started going on, and so I think that that's critically important. Anytime an entity is utilizing government resources, I think it's critical that they're held accountable. And so I think we need to have a level of community engagement, so we all come to agreement about what accountability looks like for police. But at the same time, I also think it's critically important that everyone in our community feel like they can be safe.
All right.
And so I don't think that those 2 issues are mutually exclusive.
Going to follow up on that one again with how does that work its way back through the Metro Council? Like, what oversight would you have over BRPD or East Baton Rouge Sheriffs?
Yeah. So obviously, so I don't think that everything like has to be in an ordinance per se. I think I was listening to there was a situation that happened. The situation that happened in Los Angeles where the 2 sheriff's deputies got shot.
Yeah.
So like literally that night, a well-known pastor, Bishop Noel Jones, had an online conversation with the sheriff of Los Angeles County. And one of the things that Bishop Jones was sharing is that it's important for leaders on both sides. Like we have false narratives about the community, and then there's false narratives about law enforcement. And so leaders in both of those realms have to be able to come together and have conversations to move us forward. And so that's an example, again, where it may not necessarily be an ordinance or some law that's passed, but like the dialogue has to happen and we have to have conversations. I think the most harmful thing that I see that's going on right now with this whole national debate is we're just lobbing bombs at each other. And I know people that are protesting have demands and things they want, but I've seen very few instances this summer where people have actually sat down and talked through what the concerns are.
Well, it's revealed the worst of social media.
Yeah, and so I think that's an example from a leadership standpoint or the Metro Council standpoint is having the conversations to take place. But beyond that, from a legislative standpoint, if we look at some of the things that we may be able to do, such as including, so I know that we have the Municipal Fire and Police Board, but I think that there's ways and there's things that have been done where we can have more community involvement in holding police accountable, but also in understanding some of the police concern as well. And so we have to figure out a way to get more community involvement and community conversations and what's going on. I think that's the piece that's not happening right now.
And you're right about that, because we all just like to shout from our keyboards. And we can block anybody we don't like what they have to say, but that doesn't translate into the real world.
Yeah,
that only translates into keeping us further apart in the real world, and then you see things bubble over every once in a while when we probably weren't that far apart to begin with. We just nested ourselves away from it. What was the second one? In between public safety and educational attainment, you had
infrastructure.
Infrastructure, yes. Sorry, I wasn't writing fast enough.
So infrastructure is huge. I think I see this as something that everybody in the parish, like every district, is faced with and concerned with. I know we have the Move BR program that's dealing with the roads and levels of drainage, but there's projects that are within that program, but there's some day-to-day things that people are like extremely frustrated and extremely concerned about, and basically just cutting grass and cleaning out ditches and canals. Yeah. I moved to Zachary in 2016 as a result of the flood. And so where I was living was just like completely destroyed. And so trying to find a place to get my kids in school. So we ended up moving to Zachary. And so I'm just finding out through this process that there were parts of Metro Council District 1 that were gravely impacted by the flood as well. I talked to a young lady last night who has lived in District 1 all her life, and she's moved into a different area following the flood. But she lives along Bayou Baton Rouge, which was just overrun. And so if you drive around the parish, like again, there's a number of ditches and canals and things that is overgrown, shrubbery, foliage. And so things like that happening on a regular basis, I think is a huge priority, not just for District 1, but throughout the parish.
Why, and we've had Fred Rayford on a million times to talk about this. They're so overworked. I don't know how you get to the end of the equation there without significantly adding more manpower.
Well, but at the end of the day, like, and it's not to be critical of anybody, but I think at the end of the day, like that has to be a priority. Like, we cannot
100%.
Like, we can't continue to lose property because we can't figure out a solution. I think one of the things that's interesting. I used to live in Central prior to the flood, and when the city of Central was incorporated, there was an individual, I think it's Russell Storns, who lived on Greenville Springs Road. And so when the city incorporated and, they went through the whole privatization piece, I think what was interesting, I would literally see Mr. Storns out on Greenville Springs Road with his own tractor, like cutting public property.
Yeah.
And I think like that's just a prime example of how desperate things are. And that was years ago. And so we got to figure out a solution, and we got to get it fixed, and we got to get it fixed quickly.
We have less than 2 minutes left to talk economic development. Hey, we're blowing past CBS News, Chuck. We have 2.5 minutes left to talk about economic development. How would you prioritize it, and how would you attack growing jobs in Baton Rouge?
So one of the things that I think we have to take a much stronger approach on is focusing on small businesses and minority businesses. For years, the city has had a program where they provided technical assistance through the Department of Economic Development, and that was run out of the WIA boards on Plank Road. And so as an example, if we can spread programs like that throughout the parish, bringing them closer to the people in order to be able to grow small businesses and grow minority businesses, I think inherently, it's great to recruit companies in, and I want to be a big part of that, and I want to create policy that allow that to happen. But the biggest way that we can grow our economy is to grow it organically through our locally owned businesses. And so being an advocate, I've always been an advocate for small and minority businesses, and that's one of the things that I will continue to pursue, and looking for policies and ways to grow our local businesses.
He is Eric B. Lewis, running for Metro Council District 1, and we're off and running with the interviews we're going to have with candidates along the way. Eric, we're not done with you. We're going to bring you back before Election Day for sure.
I appreciate that, sir.
Thanks for getting in the race. Moving the conversation forward is every bit as important as winning the race to begin with. So thank you for getting up and speaking up along the way. This will be available at talk1073.com almost immediately after the show. If you want to check it out, it'll be in our blogs and on demand section. Eric, we always appreciate the time, man.
Thank you, sir.
8:32, coming up on 8:32 at Talk 1073 FM. Like I said, we blew right past CBS.